With shots in arms, it was time for a venture out to Wyoming. It was my first time visiting Yellowstone National Park, and the same for my naturalist friends Bradley and Brenna, who joined me during the first part of my trip. On our way in, we drove past the Wind River Range and the Grand Tetons. I made a mental bookmark of them for a later chapter in my trip. For this first chapter, we explored America's first national park as a road tripper and day hikers, replicating that first experience with nature many have had here. A hallmark of the park are the bison that roam its open meadows. During our visit early in the summer, we could see them shedding their winter coats and guiding their young calves while creating plenty of traffic jams. Rushing water from the ice melt was another part of early summer, and we'll limit our backpacking plans in a later chapter. The other big wildlife here is the grizzly bear, which I only saw one during my entire time, and from the road on our first day. Other wildlife we saw from the road were some mule deers and a moose next to our hotel. Of course, wildlife are always the luck of the draw during a visit here. Our first hike in Yellowstone was around the upper Geyser Basin, ending at Old Faithful. We began from the Old Faithful Visitor Center, heading north on a paved trail, which was the Coyote Divide through the area. Our first major feature was Castle Geyser, which now erupts rarely. Next to it is the Crescent Pool, which started to boil over while we were here. In the distance, we saw Grand Geyser starting to erupt. It is the tallest predictable geyser with bursts of 150 to 200 feet. Daisy Geyser was next. On the other side of Daisy Geyser was where we got a glimpse of a coyote, which I had a hard time distinguishing from a wolf. We left the Coyote Divide Trail now and continued north. Immediately was Grotto Geyser. We caught it erupting as we passed. It is not known for its physical prowess at 10 feet, rather its endurance upwards of 10 hours.
Such unique features. We can't see them anywhere else. Oh, there's a buffalo over there.
We had been following the Firehole River for most of our hike and crossed it now. On the other side were more pole-like features. This included the astonishingly colorful morning glory, named for the flower. The layers of color are due to different bacteria that grow at different temperatures.
Look at the bubbles. You can see the bubbles. Bubbles!
Once we reached the Artismia trailhead, we crossed the road to the Biscuit Basin trailhead and crossed the Firehole River once again. The myriad of color pools continued here. My favorite was aptly named Sapphire Pool. To extend my hike, I decided to include the Mystic Fall Loop by turning uphill on the Ferry Creek Little Firehole Trail. After gaining most of my elevation for the day, I was brought to an overlook of the entire upper Geyser Basin from the edge of Madison Plateau. Continuing along the plateau,
Scram!
and ran into an aggressive grouse, probably protecting its nest. The trail brought me to Little Firehole River just above the falls, and thermal features around it was very distinctive both visually and odorous.
Nice buffalo. Nice buffalo. Just passing through. Nice buffalo.
A common naming mistake, as I have just made, is that these are in fact bison and not buffalo. Anyways, they were practically right on the trail as I started to head back via the Continental Divide Trail. These are clearly less walked trails, with bisons just chillaxing and rolling in the dirt here.
Hey, boo boo.
Once I got around them, I was back at Grotto Geyser. We continued back toward Old Faithful via the Upper Geyser Basin Trail. We were good on thermal pools at this point, but what we had to exclaim at was instead the setting sun in the horizon. As the sun disappeared behind the mountain, the sky exploded with pink and orange. The conclusion of our first day at Yellowstone was watching the skies give way to the eruption of Old Faithful.
That's high. It's more than 100 feet. Way more. More than 200. That's like 500.
The terraces outside of Mammoth Hot Springs in the northern part of the park was our next tourist stop on our road trip. This short walk was all on a boardwalk, but well worth the stop as the crowds can attest to. We started at the top of the terraces and worked our way around the entire structure. The layer of flats made of calcium carbonate here do not disappoint at all. I loved that I was looking into a mountain of mirrors. The cascading water running over these mini layers at the bottom of the terraces washed over me with a feeling of soothing euphoria, like seeing things fit perfectly together. Continuing on to the old terraces where the hot springs had stopped running, we could see interesting shapes and preserved trees hardened by calcium carbonate. The Liberty Cap terraces are the closest to the town and had much more bulbous structures that reminded me of mochi ice cream. Definitely could have used some on that hot day. Heading down the other side, we now had a top-down view of the terraces, starting from where the hot spring water flowed into the terraces.
That's cool. They're using data from the hot springs to try to find life on other planets.
These final terraces with the backdrop of the town Mammoth and the Absaroka Mountains are a symbol of Yellowstone, and I would sit here and stare at this for hours regardless of the crowds. Our final highlight road trip stop in Yellowstone was the Grand Prismatic, which we'll first see from the overlook. It's a pretty easy hike starting by crossing the Firehole River on a wide fountain flat drive before a short uphill to the outlook.
Wow. Is it worth it? Wow.
We sure think it was worth it. Just look at the colors.
It's like, you know, when you see the Northern Lights, how it just dances, right? That's what the smoke was looking like.
After the outlook, it was time to get close and personal by walking the boardwalks of the Midway Geyser Basin. Hey look, we're so saintly. The low evening sunlight and steam over Excelsior Crater created a glory effect, or an optic halo around our heads. Of course, making us saintly, like the people we are. After being mesmerized by the dancing steam over Excelsior Crater, we went over to be mesmerized by the Grand Prismatic. It was harder to see the brilliant colors of the pool from this up close, but the details formed by the bacteria was also interesting here. Once again, the experience I fully embraced here was the dancing steam rushing over us from the pool, revealing hidden colors, if only briefly. A very ethereal experience indeed. Thanks to Brianna and Bradley for joining me in this chapter and being the stars of the video along with Yellowstone South. You can catch them on our next chapter, backpacking along the Hellroaring Creek and Yellowstone River. And thank you for watching our video. Give us a like if you enjoyed it and subscribe if you want to see more of our adventures.